The National Desk, America's News, now.
I'm devastated for the families who have been affected by this terrible tragedy.
Good evening. I'm Amira David. Tonight, breaking news on the National Desk. A high school shooting has left at least 4 dead, including 2 teachers and 2 students, after a shooter opened fire at Appalachia High School in Winder, Georgia, just outside of Atlanta. At least 9 people have been hospitalized. The suspected shooter, believed to be a 14-year-old boy, in custody right now, as a community is left to mourn a mass shooting that still has more questions than answers. At around 9:30 in the morning, we know that's when police got the first report of an active shooter on the school's campus. By 10:30, officers from multiple law enforcement agencies were on the scene, taking the suspect right into custody. And the conditions of the victim still largely unclear right now, but authorities tonight say the shooter did surrender to authorities, and they say he will be tried as an adult. We're also hearing from some students who survived but are absolutely shaken by what happened. The conditions of the victims still.
And I heard screaming and everything. At first, I thought it was like someone just like playing around in the hallways or something. I thought it was like someone just yelling or something. So I didn't think much of it. But then like it got harder. The noise kept getting louder and louder.
I did feel scared. I was definitely shaking, and emotions were high.
Tonight, President Biden releasing a statement saying he and the First Lady are in mourning, saying in part, quote, a joyous back-to-school season has now turned into another horrific reminder of how gun violence continues to tear our communities apart. According to the Gun Violence Archive, there have been at least 36 school shootings, including this latest one in the United States just this year alone. 27 of those have happened on K-12 campuses, and then 9 have happened on college campuses. The incidents have left close to 24 people dead and over 40 injured. We'll continue to follow the developments on this heartbreaking story throughout the night, so stay with us as we bring you all the latest, both on air and online at thenationaldesk.com. Right now, as many as 65 million Americans under heat alerts as a dangerous heat wave builds over the southwestern and western United States, with high temps expected to last throughout the weekend. Some areas will experience multiple days with triple-digit highs. Temperatures are set to reach up to 120 degrees, especially in desert locations. The National Weather Service is warning that heat-related impacts are on the rise. This as we get new data on just how much heat-related deaths have gone up over the last 25 years. A new study in the medical journal JAMA shows a 117% spike from 1999 to 2023. The data from the CDC also shows that since 2016, deaths have increased by roughly 17% each year. Since 1999, more than 21,000 people died from heat, with the vast majority of them recorded in California, Arizona, Nevada, and Texas. New tonight, the White House condemning what they say are efforts by the Kremlin to influence the upcoming election. The DOJ has seized 32 internet domains and sanctioned several individuals it says were behind the covert interference campaigns to enlist unwitting American influencers to spread propaganda. The Justice Department says Russia's disinformation machine is going full throttle to try and influence the presidential election and opinions about Ukraine.
These websites were designed to appear to American readers as if they were major U.S. news sites like the Washington Post or Fox News. But in fact, they were fake sites.
Russia has meddled in our society and tried to sow discord for decades. Really what we're seeing is just more tools in the toolbox with the advent of technology.
And we are 2 months away from the election. The candidates are adjusting their stances on their economic agenda. Specifically, voters are paying close attention to both Harris and former President Donald Trump's tax plans. The National Desk's Atrel Nashar has a closer look.
The presidential candidates' tax plans are in focus this week. And while, if elected, their proposals would need congressional approval, they do tell voters what their priorities are. Vice President Harris announces she wants to give new small businesses a $50,000 tax deduction for startup costs, 10 times the current benefit, and cut red tape on working across state lines and filing taxes.
As president, one of my highest priorities will be to strengthen America's small businesses.
Harris also supports a White House budget proposal that includes having wealthy Americans who are worth at least $100 million pay taxes on unrealized investment gains. But some of Harris's big donors, and even one of her own campaign surrogates, aren't sold on the idea.
Let's say you're an entrepreneur. You create a company. It gets to 100 million or 200 million on paper. Now, if you're taxing that, you're probably going to force that person to sell it.
Thank you very much, everybody.
On the Republican side, not everyone's happy with what Trump is putting forward, a universal 10 to 20% tariff on goods coming into the United States. And if they're from China, an additional 50 to 60%. Earlier this year, Trump told Time magazine, and a lot of people say, oh, that's going to be a tax on us. I don't believe that. But these tariffs would cost the typical middle-class household at least $1,700 in increased taxes each year, while inflicting significant collateral damage on the U.S. economy, according to the nonpartisan Peterson Institute for International Economics.
Just going to cost countries that have been ripping us off for years, like China and many others, in all fairness to China.
Trump also aims to revive his 2017 tax cuts, which experts say would only partially offset the cost of those tariffs on the middle class, but would bring bigger benefits to the wealthy and corporations with the goal of promoting investments.
Now, both candidates have a lot to answer for when it comes to how these plans would be paid for or how much they're prepared to add to the national debt. No doubt they'll be asked those questions when they debate September 10th.
And Atra Harris also just announced that she supports a lower capital gains tax for wealthy Americans, lower than President Biden. And is this just her being more clear on her policy or changing it?
Well, that's the thing about a vice president running for president. You kind of assume that they're going with whatever the White House puts out. But anytime they deviate, it makes news, which is certainly the case here. On the campaign trail, she hasn't talked about how she would want to tax capital gains. So this is the first time she's coming out with this policy, but it breaks from the White House. Now, I do want to note for viewers, this is separate than a potential tax on unrealized gains, like we talked about in that story there. So what Harris wants, which she just introduced a couple hours ago, she says if somebody earns more than $1 million a year, the tax rate on their long-term capital gains, so an asset they've held more than a year and then they sell, should be 28%. Compare that to the current maximum rate of 23.8% for those millionaires. What President Biden is proposing, which is this big deviation, is 39.6%. So Harris says that 28% would make the tax code more fair while still promoting investment and innovation.
All right, I'm sure we'll hear more on that in next week's debate. Atral Nashar, live in Washington, D.C. for us. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Oklahoma will not be able to access $4.5 million in funds for family planning services. The Supreme Court just sided with lower courts in ruling that the Health and Human Services Department can cut the state off from a grant for refusing to comply with a requirement to make abortion counseling and referrals available. When the state cut off the money, Oklahoma filed an emergency appeal. Elementary school students in Freehold Township, New Jersey, having to relocate right before classes begin tomorrow. Just a few days ago, officials said they found mold at Laura Donovan Elementary School over the summer and that remediation will take a few months. Students are being moved to other elementary schools temporarily, leaving parents scrambling. And we're taking a live look now over New York City, where today China's Consul General Wang Ping has been expelled from the diplomatic mission on Governor Kathy Hochul's suggestion. And it comes one day after a former Hochul staffer was arrested under suspicion of being a Chinese agent. Linda Sun and her husband Chris Hu were arraigned yesterday, and they both pleaded not guilty. Speaking at an event today, Governor Hochul said she asked the State Department to take appropriate action in response to the dangerous and outrageous actions taken by the People's Republic of China. The man charged with murder in the deadly shootings of 4 people on a Chicago train this week is now being held without bond. 30-year-old Ronnie Davis appeared in court today for the first time since Monday, when he was tracked down with the help of surveillance video and caught shortly after those attacks. Prosecutors say Davis already had a criminal history. His next court date is the 27th. Jury selection begins tomorrow in Los Angeles in the case of President Joe Biden's son Hunter. The criminal charges surround Hunter Biden's failure to pay about $1.4 million in taxes between 2016 and 2019, while his father was serving as vice president. National correspondent Christine Frizzell brings us a closer look at what we can expect.
It was a time in his life marked by drug addiction, luxury cars, and millions of dollars in business deals with overseas companies, the aftermath of which special counsel David Weiss says was in violation of the law. President Joe Biden's son Hunter's case involves 9 counts total, but 3 felony counts, including tax evasion and filing a false return, to all of which he's pleaded not guilty. Hunter Biden himself blaming his poor decision-making on the trauma of losing his mother and sister at a young age, and later his brother Beau to cancer.
And in the depths of my addiction, I was extremely irresponsible with my finances.
His indictment asserting he spent millions of dollars on an extravagant lifestyle rather than paying his tax bills, with plans for at least one former business partner to testify. His financial missteps have for years been at the center of a probe by House Republicans who had been looking to tie his father to the deals since he was vice president at the time, with questions about why Hunter was paid millions from companies based in China and Ukraine.
Clearly, I think the foreign entities were hoping to gain favor with Joe Biden. That's why they were sending money to Hunter Biden and to the family.
Still, Hunter Biden was not charged with violating the Foreign Agents Registration Act, or FARA, though some attorneys have suggested he should. He was found guilty on 3 gun-related charges in a separate federal case. His sentencing for that one is expected shortly after the election. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National Desk.
Christine, thanks. And in just about an hour, Nationwide Arena in Columbus expected to host scores of Blue Jacket hockey fans for a special vigil remembering Johnny Gaudreau, affectionately known as Johnny Hockey. The NHL star and his brother Matthew were tragically killed last week while biking in New Jersey, struck by an accused drunk driver. At the vigil, there will be 13 minutes and 21 seconds of silent remembrance, reflecting the number 13 Johnny wore with the Blue Jackets, while 21 is the number Matthew wore while playing hockey at Boston College. And coming up, the status of a hostage release deal in the Middle East as Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu faces mounting criticism. And later, the controversy in a Texas county over money going towards registering more voters before the November election. We'll be right back. Tonight, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu remaining defiant in the face of mounting Israeli protests and outrage over the lack of a ceasefire deal days after Israel was forced to bring home 6 more hostages in body bags. Israel says Hamas shot them just before IDF forces could rescue them, and Hamas warned others would see the same fate if Israel looked to retrieve them by way of military force instead of through a hostage exchange deal. When it comes to that elusive deal tonight, it remains at an impasse. President Biden and now some U.S. lawmakers suggesting Netanyahu is in part to blame.
That he's been dragging his feet. We need both Netanyahu and Hamas to come to the table and accept the proposal that President Biden has put on the table.
Control over the Philadelphia corridor at the Egypt-Gaza border remains a huge sticking point in the negotiations. The White House says Israel originally agreed to withdraw forces from the corridor in the first phase of a deal, but now Netanyahu says he won't consider doing that until a second phase, something Hamas says it won't accept. The presidential candidates are hitting the campaign trail today. Vice President Kamala Harris made new economic proposals in New Hampshire, focusing on encouraging small business investment.
We will expand the tax deduction for startups to $50,000. It's essentially a tax cut for starting a small business.
Former President Donald Trump, meantime, in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania today for a town hall with Sean Hannity. Trump is expected to discuss his preparation for next week's debate, issues impacting the nation, his goals, and other topics. The town hall kicks off at 9 p.m. over on Fox News. And it comes as a new report adds to growing concerns about political bias this election season and how big tech is playing a role. The National Desk's Kayla Gaskins explains.
Republicans and big tech at it again. A report by Fox News Digital noting Amazon's Alexa had very different responses when asked about the two major candidates for president.
Why should I vote for Trump?
I cannot provide responses that endorse any political party or its leader.
Why should I vote for Kamala Harris?
While there are many reasons to vote for Kamala Harris, the most significant may be that she is a female of color with a comprehensive plan to address racial injustice.
Amazon calling this an error that was quickly fixed. A Trump campaign spokesperson calling it big tech election interference. Amazon employees have overwhelmingly donated to Harris this year by a factor of 10 to 1. Many in the GOP view this as yet another example of big tech tipping the political scales to favor candidates they prefer.
The Democrat Party is the party of censorship.
Earlier this summer, Google was accused of blocking search terms related to the assassination attempt of Donald Trump. Meta slammed for adding an altered label to some highly circulated photos of Trump in the moments after the shots were fired. And conservatives criticized Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg for $300 million he donated in 2020 with the goal of ensuring safe elections during a pandemic. His critics said the so-called Zuckerbucks benefited Democrats more than Republicans. Zuckerberg, in a letter to the House Judiciary Committee last week, said the donations he and his wife gave were intended to be nonpartisan and reaffirmed his commitment to political neutrality, writing, "I don't plan on making a similar contribution this cycle." Democrats also feel targeted by big tech, pointing to when X, now owned by Trump supporter Elon Musk, temporarily locked an account for a group supporting Kamala Harris in the middle of a successful fundraising campaign.
Polling by Pew Research Center from this past spring shows 78% of Americans believe big tech has too much power and influence in politics. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
Well, the National Hurricane Center continues to track 3 disturbances in the Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. At this time, all 3 have less than a 30% chance of developing into a named storm within the next 7 days. But keep an eye on disturbance 1. That's this one right here just south of Cuba. Right now, it's heading to the south of the Gulf of Mexico, and it's continuing there later this week. It has the highest chance of strengthening of all three of those. And so far this year, we've seen just 5 named storms in the Atlantic, far below the 17 to 25 named storms predicted by NOAA in the spring. But according to NOAA, September and October historically are seen as the most active for hurricanes and tropical storms in the last 80 years. The hurricane season does go to the end of November with 12 weeks left. Plenty of time for another big storm to come. Hundreds of people still under evacuation orders in Sierra County, California, as a wildfire burns in the Tahoe National Forest. According to CAL FIRE, the Bear Fire has burned 3,200 acres and is still 0% contained. The U.S. Forest Service says it expects the fire to grow. More than 280 buildings are threatened. Residents who did not evacuate said they feel better keeping an eye on their property while they watch the air show.
I'm seeing lots of airplane traffic attending to it. The terrain's hard to get to, and they've got a variety of things, big jets, double helicopters, and what do they call them, Hueys? Lots of traffic.
You said you're pretty pleased with the air attack.
Yeah, I just wish I had power and water.
A new list of the best places to retire in the United States is out, and some of them may surprise you. Wallet Hub ranking cities based on things like cost of living, health care, and the availability of activities. Now, many of the top spots are in Florida, with Orlando ranked number 1. That's probably not a huge surprise. But third on the list, interestingly, Minneapolis. How about that? And also Cincinnati, Atlanta in the top 10 there. New Mexico prosecutors are still seeking criminal charges against Alec Baldwin. In a court filing made public today, prosecutors are asking a judge to reinstate the involuntary manslaughter charge in the fatal shooting of cinematographer Helena Hutchins on the set of Rust. Judge Mary Marlowe Sommer dismissed that case against Baldwin back in July, halfway through the trial, because prosecution withheld police evidence from the defense. Coming up, a California animal shelter has been struggling since the pandemic. What has to happen to prevent it from closing its doors? We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. We're taking the pulse of America, and we begin in California, where an animal shelter may not be able to afford staying open.
Valley Animal Haven has been taking in and adopting out animals in Lemoore for the past 10 years. But the economy has taken its toll on the no-kill shelter. Recently, it stopped taking in animals.
It's really hard for us to turn away people when we can't help, when we don't have the ability. Our resources are stretched as thin as they can be when we have 180 animals on site.
Valley Animal Haven operates with just 4 staff members. Jackman says the pandemic created unforeseen economic problems for all animal shelters. Her operating budget has been a constant sea of red. Jackman says if contributions don't pick up dramatically, she has no choice but to shut down the shelter.
they have an agenda.
A long line of conservative speakers who say they're concerned about election integrity testified against a contract that would pay $392,000 to a firm called Civic Government Solutions, or CGS.
This county is $2.5 billion in debt, and this money should not be spent on a partisan project.
Outgoing Elections Administrator Jackie Callanan testified the county has never had this kind of contract, and her staff is already overwhelmed with forms from other organizations working to register voters. In some cases, the information is wrong, which confuses and angers voters. The CEO of Civic Government Solutions denied his company favors Democrats, but he acknowledged another one of his organizations works primarily for progressive candidates and causes, and he has made pro-Democrat comments on his blog.
The small town of Seneca Falls filling out the municipal building for a critical vote Tuesday. The town board was set to vote on whether to approve a local permit for continued operations of the Seneca Meadows landfill. That's something many in the community feel strongly against.
The odor is a problem. It has not been solved, it has not been fixed, and it's only gotten worse. And that's the message we'll be sending tonight.
After a number of people took to the microphone to voice their displeasure with the landfill, the board voting unanimously to table the vote until December, a move not everyone agrees with.
Well, coming up, one of the top 10 biggest lottery jackpots ever is growing. How much you could win right after this. Tonight, the Mega Millions jackpot just a little bit bigger after there were no winners last night. The estimated jackpot now worth $740 million with a cash value of $366.3 million. To take home the grand prize, you have to match all 6 numbers, including the gold mega ball. According to Mega Millions, this will be the 7th largest jackpot in game history if someone wins. And you still have time to get that office pool going because the next drawing happens on Friday. Best of luck. That does it for this edition of the National Desk. We invite you to join us again this evening for more coverage on America's top stories. I'm Amira David. Thanks so much for watching.